Welcome everyone to VSBA's monthly webinar, which we hold on the first Thursday of each month at noon. And today we're going to be talking about the contract database. And we have with us today Chris Leopold, who is an attorney with McNeil, Leddy & Sheehan in Burlington, Vermont. And he is our expert for today. We're very much looking forward to hearing from Chris about his recommendations for the best ways for school boards to utilize the contract database. Before we get into the actual information, just wanted to give you some background information. Today we are going to be having an overview of the contract database, talking about how to access the contract database, and most importantly, talking with you about how to use the contract database. And we're happy to answer your questions at any time. As I said, put them in the question box, and Carrie will let us know that there are questions there. Next slide, please, Carrie. So we wanted to let you know that the database is a powerful tool for providing knowledge about recent negotiations of comparable districts to yours. And it is a subscription service of the VSBA. The cost is $200 per year. And I'm going to hand it over now to Carrie Lamb just for a moment, because she is really the keeper of the database. And she's going to let you know, first of all, how to subscribe if you are not already subscribed. And then if you don't know whether or not your supervisory union or supervisory district is a subscriber, you can contact Carrie at the email address that is on the slide. And she's also going to give some information about how VSBA updates the database. So yes. I will hand it over to you for a moment, Carrie.
Okay, so as she said, to email me to find out if you are a subscriber, or you can ask your superintendent or business manager. They would also know. And as the same way to email me if you want to subscribe. What I'll do is reply back with the user ID and password and the invoice for the $200 a year. And the subscription automatically goes to each year. I'll send the invoice to the business manager for the subscription. My process for updating the database is that I keep a huge spreadsheet of all of the school districts in the state. And I keep some information in there, like when the contracts that we currently have end, so that I can, when you're getting close to the end of your contract, I'll then contact the secretary or the superintendent and ask them for an update. If your teachers have negotiated a new master agreement, if your paraeducators, maintenance, administrators, clerical have negotiate a new contract in the last 6 months, I ask them to send me the contracts, and they're very good at sending it. I think I've gotten 50 of them in the last 2 weeks from secretaries, so that we can try and keep everything up to date. If you go into the database and you happen to see someone that you know, like yourself or some other district that you know has a finalized contract and it's not in there, I always appreciate you letting me know so that I can get that and update it, because you know, all systems are not fail-safe. So feedback is always wonderful and never a problem.
Thank you, Carrie. We'll go on to the next slide, please. So once you've spoken with Carrie or emailed her, each supervisory union and supervisory district that has subscribed has one user ID and password. And that user ID and password can be shared between school board members and key administrative personnel. And if you find that for some reason your password is not working, once again, contact Carrie Lamb and she will fix it for you and get you back on track. We're gonna go on to the next slide now, and Chris is gonna talk about key administrative personnel that you may want to make sure also have access to the database.
Yeah, I think throughout most of the state, school board bargaining teams include at least one administrator, I've worked with some districts where at the table there are 3 administrators, typically the superintendent, the business manager, and the HR director. You know, the HR directors are relatively new on a statewide basis in terms of their direct involvement in negotiations. But I think that there's a number who are actively involved in negotiations and routinely appear at the table to help people. I think it's particularly important that these individuals have access to the database. For superintendents, I think it's important in a number of areas when either the superintendent and your administrative team or the school board is interested in trying to propose new language in the area of workday, work year, other structural aspects of your contract that really relate directly to educational needs and issues, such as, you know, the number of faculty meetings that a district is permitted to hold. Or majority of the contracts in the state have a provision in them that limits that. So superintendents are frequently the administrator who is asked to by a bargaining team to look into those issues, or superintendents on their own want to look at those issues as they're thinking about pursuing that in bargaining. The business managers in most districts across the state are the individuals that a bargaining team turns towards in terms of looking for salary and benefit comparability issues. You know, in terms of benefits, it typically used to be looking into healthcare and the copays, and that information isn't at this point something that's going to differ around the state for teachers as a result of the statewide bargaining. But there is still a great deal of variance, and will continue to be for the next 2 years, with regard to educational support staff. And so business managers frequently deal with those issues, and also look at issues about the structure of salary schedules. HR directors do that same type of work, but typically much less often than the school business managers do in most districts across the state. So in those 3 areas, and with those functions, those are the type of individuals that will support the bargaining team and the needs that they have. I've found it's really useful in bargaining at the table when we're talking about either a new benefit that the association is looking for, or when we're talking about, for example, the number of faculty meetings that a district's allowed, and the board is proposing to increase it, to really be able to have that type of research done in advance, and be able to share that at the bargaining table. And prior to the VSBA establishing this type of database, it really used to be having the superintendent or the superintendent's administrative assistant either make phone calls or send out emails to other districts to find out what they had. So, you know, it's one of the real important benefits of the database at this point in time. Next slide. How to use data. Data plays an incredibly important role in the bargaining, and you know, I think negotiations in large part is about needs and wants. You know, typically from the board perspective, we talk about needs, what the district needs to have what we need to change, what type of flexibility we need to have in the contract in different areas. The union typically tends to talk about what they want. They want an additional benefit, or they want to have additional preparation time for teacher prep time. And so when you look at those needs and wants in collective bargaining, one of the important points is to be able to know, so what are the benchmarks that are out there, either in terms of comparably sized districts, or what are the benchmarks that are out there in our county, looking at on a regional basis. And the role that plays really is that data has the ability to help persuade people, or alternatively to convince people that they need to fall into line, so that they're no longer an outlier when the data supports your position on a particular issue. Data is also important, not just at the local bargaining table, but if impasse is declared, and you then move on to mediation and fact-finding, data plays an increasingly important role. And if a school board has a proposal to increase the number of work days by 2 days, and you're in mediation, one of the first questions a mediator is going to ask the school board team or the school's negotiator is, what does everybody else have in your region? What's the length of the work year in the rest of the county? And so that type of information is important for you to have. It's important for you to have whether it's in your favor, or alternately, if you have a minority position. If you're trying to gain 2 extra work days, and you already have more work days than everybody else in the county, or you have the same number, it's important to know that. It's important to be able to present arguments about why you need those days, and why your needs are perhaps more unique than another district. But at the very least, you want to know it so that when the mediator goes over to the union side, he or she doesn't come back to you and say, well, on the work year, the union's position is that you're asking for more days than anybody else in your region. And here's the printout that they gave me that shows that your position isn't supported, at least in terms of comparability. And it doesn't mean at that point that the school board says, oh, yeah, you're right, I guess we'll withdraw our position. It's like, no, we're aware of that. Here's why we're asking for that. And someone in our county, some district in our county, has to be the first district to break that 185-day barrier, or 184 days, whatever the number of days it is. So that's the role that data can play. When you get to fact finding in the process, data becomes even more important, because at that point, fact finders tend to make decisions and to make recommendations about issues based on comparability, and they want to know, for the length of the work year, what does every other district in the county have for the length of the work year. If the particular issue that the board is looking for in part is size dependent, you may want to be able to present them information about similarly sized districts that have 300 to 500 students. What do they have in their contract? Or alternatively, what's the amount of preparation time that that typically exists at the high school level, and to be able to present that type of information. So those data points are important, and in the database, Carrie's going to show us, but you have the ability to look in the database by the type of contract to separate teacher, administrator, and support staff contracts, and to do searches based just on one of those types of contracts or all of them. You also have the ability to do it on the basis of supervisory unions, supervisory districts, or to limit searches based on particular counties. You can also narrow searches based on the student population. Is it a pre-K? Is it a pre-K 12? What's the grade range that you're talking about? I referenced the district size, and again, you have the ability to look at small districts, large districts, or all districts, and to be able to present that information. And again, that's useful because frequently, sometimes the need that a district has that it's pursuing in the context of a bargaining proposal is based on your size, whether it's because of increased flexibility that you want to have, or relative to things such as the number of assignments that a teacher can teach. Those are important. And then you also have the ability to look at contracts and separate them in terms of the contract year. What year does it start in July, and then what year does it end in June? All of those are really important features to be able to help you as you're searching for data and trying to establish information in the context of bargaining.
Okay, at this point, Carrie is going to run a poll and ask all of our attendees to answer a question about what data points do you think you'd find most useful in the database.
All right, we're collecting responses now. I have 50% of the answers in. If you all could put your answers in, we're asking you what type of data that you think is most useful in the database, so that we can get an idea of what you all think. All right, I'm going to give you another 10 seconds, and then we're going to close it out. All right, here we go. So we closed it out, and here are the responses. So it looks like type of database is the most important. So now we'd just like to ask a question of you all. So if you could, in your question box, if there are data points, which is, so when we say data points, we're talking about different ways to narrow down what contracts are relevant to you. If there are different data points that are, that would be useful to you that we don't currently put in the database, please put it in your question box now. That way we can look into doing that type of database search in the future. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to put the questions into the question box or the database choices. Okay, thank you very much. We'll use that information as we move forward in with our database. Oh, someone said contracts by tech centers. That's actually under SU. You can put in, you can select the tech centers. And we'll show you that when we get to the database.
Yes, we're going to be doing some work right within the database, so you can see how it works. So at this point, Carrie, could you please put the PowerPoint back up?
Yes. Here you go.
Great.
Okay.
How to use the database. Carrie's going to give us a demonstration. But it essentially, as we referenced, it really gives you the ability to use different database to find comparable districts and compare information. It helps you to use the data after you find the comparable districts. And you can look at patterns. You can collect sample contract language that you may find helpful in terms of a particular issue that you've been searching the database for. Or alternately, you can use it to really develop comprehensive information relative to data analysis, and sometimes at that level, it's going to require that you really download the contracts and or read the provisions of the contracts that are there, and then be able to capture that information in an Excel spreadsheet or some other type of spreadsheet to be able to present. I'll give you an example of how this information was used recently with a district that I worked with. One of the issues in bargaining was after school meetings for teachers. And the contract that we were working with had pretty restrictive language about the number and the length of time that teachers had to stay after school relative to faculty meetings or team meetings that were being held. And going into to mediation, the superintendent began to do a statewide search through the database, and we captured the contract language in every contract in the state where there was language relative to after school meetings, faculty meetings, or team meetings, and then presented that both in mediation and ultimately in fact finding in a very compelling way to show that the overwhelming majority of school districts in the state either had no language, no restrictions on the amount of time, or had far greater amounts of time that the teachers were required to be available for faculty and team meetings on a weekly basis. And it was compelling information for the ultimately for the fact finder, and led to a successful result for the board. So that's an example of how you're able to use the data and to be able to search, whether it's for comparable districts or to do a really a statewide analysis. Our analysis first started on a regional basis, and then we expanded it and looked at similar sized districts, and then ultimately we did a statewide comparison. Carrie,
Okay.
do you want to show how to use the database?
Yes, sir. So this is the database. It is web-based. So what I did to start off here is to find other schools that are maybe relevant to your district. I started off by narrowing it down by county. You may want to, use other things, but I started off by starting by county, and then I said, well, I really want the teacher contracts in that county. So you see, you have drop downs here. You can select from teacher, support staff, non-union. We don't have as many non-union contracts because usually they're unallowed. Maintenance, office support, and fact finders reports. But I'm going to select teacher. So now down below is the results. So now when I first did the Windham County, these are all the contracts, but in Windham County. Now that's too many to compare. So now I'm going to say, okay, I want the teacher contracts in Windham County. So now I still have a lot of contracts here. So now I want to say, okay, I want the teacher contracts in Windham County that expire in 2020, because I want to know the ones that are relevant. So then I'm just going to hit search again. And now these are the teacher contracts in Windham County that will expire in 2020. That'll help me to select which ones to compare. Now, when you want to look at them, if you see over here in action, you can look at them online, so you don't have to download every contract. If you're looking for specific details in each contract, it's helpful just to look at them online and start your spreadsheet, which is the next thing we'll talk about, which is the next step of comparing. Or if you want to have all your data with you, because maybe where you're negotiating there's no service for internet, you can download all the contracts that you're talking about that you're comparing to, if that's helpful for you also. Now you can see right here, which show the results of search criteria. You can see which county it is that's teacher contract since 2020. And at any point you can obviously change and go back and take things out so that you can go back to just the Windham County.
Now, the other thing that's helpful, just to chime in, is when you get your search results, if you don't know off the top of your head, and without your having to go look at another resource, you can also see what the student population is in a particular district.
Here, district size, yeah.
And under district size, and then you can also look at what the number of students is and the student population. So, for example, if you want to focus on just pre-K or you want to focus on 6 through 12 contracts, you have the ability to do that after you get your search and can just look at those contracts if you choose. So it's really beneficial in that regard, because some issues that you're dealing with at the bargaining table really focus more on what's happening at the elementary level. Some of the issues focus exclusively on the structure of the workday at the high school level. And the database really helps you separate and look at those contracts when you're trying to focus on a particular issue.
Okay, are we ready for the next
Carrie,
slide?
back to you.
All right, I think we're going to the next slide now. Okay, this is the comparison spreadsheet. Did you want me to go over this one?
Yes, please.
So this is kind of step 2. After you've found the contracts that are comparable to your school district, or the ones that you want to use as comparisons, this is just a sample, so don't look at the numbers and that kind of thing. This is just to show you that then you can pull out of each of those contracts. You can create your own spreadsheet and pull out what the information you want to compare. And you'll see in the handouts section of this webinar, and also with the attachments that go with the email, with the video, this comparison. And what I've done in this one is I've created these down arrows, which are filters, so that if you have several things that you're looking at comparing, you can filter them, which is to take, have it go large to small, or that type of thing. I also created a little average thing here. Oh, now it's, so when you get the PowerPoint, if you click on it, it'll take you to the online version. And so you can see with the filters, you can say, do you want, okay, I don't want to use that district in this comparison because they aren't relevant. So you can take that one out using the filter. I also put in the average so that as you're talking at the table, you can see what the average is. In this case, average base salary, so that you can have a better, more knowledgeable, data-driven discussion around things. I did put a little explanation of what the down arrows are on this. However, this is just an example for you to see what you can do with the information that you pull out of the database.
I think, Carrie, can you go back to that slide?
Sure.
I just want to address one thing. When you do this type of comparison, it really requires that you pull up the salary schedule and look at the salary schedule of each contract that you've looked at in the database, and then enter the information. When you're doing these types of salary comparisons, I think it's important to look at a number of data points. The base salary is important. It's also, I think, useful to look at the max salary, but frequently the structure of salary schedules varies from one district to another, as well as if you're looking at different regions, some of the regions in the state have patterns of the structure of their schedules, and the structure of schedules in Windsor County is structured more similarly than when you look at the salary schedule in Hartford versus looking at the salary schedule in Rutland, for example. So when you're trying to do comparisons, sometimes what's I find really beneficial and useful in bargaining is to look at a number of data points on a salary schedule, to look at the base salary, and then to look at what's the salary at bachelor's step 10, what's the salary at bachelor's 30 step 10, what's the salary at master's step 1, and so on, going across the salary schedule. And when you do that type of analysis, you'll really see that there are significant differences in the structure of the schedules, even in a region. And I think that's important because sometimes just looking at the base and the maximum salary are misleading as the only data points.
Right.
And I know in Chittenden County, for example, you can look at the 3, quote, highest paying districts in the county, and their salary schedules are structured very differently. And depending on which data point you're looking at, it may be that Essex has the highest salary at that one data point, but you look at another data point and South Burlington has the highest salary, and so on. So those are important things to consider when you're looking and doing searches in the database, is to be able to
Right.
to look at those type of nuances.
Right, because one district may be trying to attract younger teachers. It depends on what their goals are, which obviously is really important discussion to have before you start your comparisons. And as Chris said, this is just an example of just using the base salary, but you may also want to use like sick days or sick banks or number of days work, anything. But this type of comparison spreadsheet will help you to see all the way across the board from districts that are comparable to you, and the things that are important to your district to negotiate, so you can get a better picture.
I think the other thing is sometimes looking at these types of comparisons in several areas helps you anticipate issues that you're going to see the union present at the bargaining table. I think that's really beneficial as well, to be able to anticipate those types of proposals and understand what may be coming at you, both in the context of what's a pattern in the county as well as what's new in the county, so that when the union's been successful in one district in negotiating a new benefit, or negotiating a new provision, to be able to anticipate that being presented to your in your bargaining, and to be able to have a response that you've already prepared and you understand and you're aware of it. It also gives you the opportunity to really call up the superintendent or the board chair in the other district and have a conversation about, so can you tell me what's the background on this provision being in your contract? How did it end up there? What precipitated it, et cetera. Those are really useful and beneficial, and it doesn't make any difference from my perspective whether you're talking about a contract provision that is providing a new benefit to teachers, or whether you're talking about a contract provision that gives the board new flexibility in how it structures something, such as how it's structured its workday or teacher assignments or other issues conversely. So I think it's really important to be able to use those in that way.
Are we ready to move on?
We
Yes.
are.
All right, there you go.
We wanted to let you know. Yes, we wanted to let you know that the VSBA, in addition to this contract database, we collect information about arbitrators, mediators, and fact finders. Carrie collects that every other year. And this information is available to school board members and administrators on request. If you're looking into different mediators, for example, you may want to contact Carrie and see what information the VSBA has on those mediators. It's not in the contract database, but it is something that you can request from the VSBA and could be useful information to you. Do you have anything further to add on that, Chris?
No, I think it's really, really beneficial, and school boards should understand that all of the capabilities, and I would say, and then some, but all of the capabilities that we've talked about in terms of data and analysis and being able to look at contracts, the Vermont NEA has had that information and those databases for over 30 years, and I think it's important to understand they have that ability, the capacity. They use it. They use it to help drive bargaining proposals on both a regional as well as a statewide basis. And then they also maintain this same type of information about arbitrators, mediators, and fact finders. And I think it's important for school boards to share that information when you have an arbitration decision, to be able to provide that information to the VSBA, to be able to provide information about mediators and fact finders, and to be able to share fact finding reports. All of that's really beneficial information to have.
Yes, and you can get some of the fact finders reports in the database. Also, I want to let you know that in the data that we give you on arbitrator, mediators, and fact finders, it does also tell them like what they decided, and it gives a little bit of more than just their name and address. It's like when it happened, what was the decision, were they easy to work with, information like that that is on that data as well.
Carrie, do we have any questions?
I do not see any.
Okay. Well, at this point, we could pause for a moment in case anyone does have a question. Please type it into the question box. And if not, we're always happy to speak with you at the VSBA. And if we can't answer your question, we'll hopefully find somebody who can. The contact information for myself and Chris is below. And I'll check again with you, Carrie, see if you have any questions in the question box.
We do not have any at this time, Sue.
All right.
Okay.
Let me just, I think the VSBA having this is a terrific service. I was a school board member 30 plus years ago, and I wish we'd had this type of service available to us then. And I really encourage school boards to actively use it in the context of the bargaining, and to permit their administrators and administrative team to be able to use it as a really helpful tool.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate the time you took out of your day to spend with us talking about the contract database.